Do you believe in alternate universes?
You are listening to Delayed Replay.
The improvised movie review podcast. Wink.
Everything is fine here. We're all fine. Just sit tight and listen to them talk about the movies they definitely saw.
Don't delay. We have to listen right away.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we talk about movies either weeks or months or even a day after they came out. This particular episode, we're talking about a horror movie that came out last April, actually, called Antlers. And with me, I have my good friend, Claudia. How are you, Claudia?
Hello. I am good. Very excited to talk about the movie, seeing as it's spooky season.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've been wanting to talk about this one for a while, but it's like, I gotta wait for spooky season before doing that. And so, yeah, this should be fun.
Yeah, my friends and I actually normally do like a series of horror movie marathons once we get around October. I have one friend who doesn't watch scary movies at any other part of the year, except for the October-September season. So now that we're officially in full swing, he's broken out all the horror movies that came out in the last year that he neglected to see. So it's actually a really good timing for me.
Yeah, I kind of noticed how September has kind of become part of the spooky season. So it's not like just October anymore, from what I can tell.
I mean, that's a huge... I'm very glad that's happened, because right now, obviously, Christmas has eaten Thanksgiving, and I'm not a huge fan of that one, but if we're gonna have holiday creep, I definitely am in favor of Halloween season creeping into September.
Yeah, and this is kind of like a little rant that I have, but how, I don't know, it's like a pet peeve of mine when, people, post about watching horror movies, only in October. I don't know, it's like October comes and they're like, oh, I'm finally gonna be watching these horror movies. And it's like, part of me is like, horror is a year-round thing. You can enjoy it any time, not just October. So it's like with September now part of it, it's like slowly but surely we're getting closer to making it a year-round type of thing.
You definitely hate my friend then, but regardless, we're in horror movie season, so it's good timing.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe eventually it'll be like Nightmare Before Christmas when Halloween creeps into December or something. I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, for the Nightmare Before Christmas stands, I think that's already really true. For some people, that movie is their whole identity.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a great movie, and 2 years ago I got to see the Hollywood Bowl performance with an orchestra and the cast members singing their lines from the movie, and Tim Burton showed up and some or part of Oingo Boingo was there. It was an experience.
See, I never cared for it at all. I got shown it a few times, but it really doesn't do anything for me as far as films go. So, there's that, I guess.
Well, that's okay. I still consider you a friend, despite
I'm glad.
That. Yeah, I mean, we disagree.
Glaring character flaw.
Right, because we are characters written in this story that is real life. But yeah, there are some things that you and I have disagreed on, but it's fun to talk about regardless.
Yeah, and I don't hate Nightmare Before Christmas by any means. It just wasn't my favorite movie as a kid, so I don't have the same nostalgia factor that I think a lot of people do around that movie.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so with Antlers, so this movie is kind of based on a short story called The Quiet Boy by Nick and Tosca, but I've never read it.
Yeah, neither have I, and I was wondering where you... Okay, yeah, I see in the description they mention that it's based on that, but that is not a story I'm super familiar with, so that's interesting.
Right, and I've had people tell me that creative liberties were taken. I mean, and Tosca was involved with this, but sometimes when things get translated from like short stories or novels to like the screen, like there are changes, but they still try to keep like the spirit of it. Like if they are like trying hard enough,
Yeah, well, and I looked up Nick for us, and Mr. Antosca has a like background in screenwriting as well, so it seems like he's at least like for his bibliography, it does look like it includes a lot of film and production awards and work, so I guess it makes sense. But yeah, no, I've never heard of this story before, so that's super interesting.
And I guess the quiet boy refers to like this kid in the movie whose name is Lucas. He's like in class when like the teacher, Julia Meadows, who's played by Kerry Russell, is talking about like Native American stories. Like she says there are these stories passed down by indigenous peoples. And while she's like talking about like the craft and art of storytelling and whatnot, Lucas is like daydreaming that he's like going to this creepy house and like feeding something to this creature, which we later learn is a wendigo. And we don't get like a full glimpse of it there, but like the teacher yells his name Lucas and he like snaps out of it, and it's like that's when like something is up with him.
I'm gonna be honest, with that background and with like the wendigo imagery, I'm not sure that this is the most how do we say respectful depiction of Native American folklore and culture out there. I mean, a lot of old school movies do it, though we're kind of moving away from it now that we kind of have grown up a little bit and have realized how like problematic it can be to just kind of rip a living culture's mythology from them and turn it into a horror movie for a bunch of what appears to be mostly white people. You do remember there's that scene in the movie where they talk to like that one guy, but like otherwise, this is definitely a classic case of little white boy, white teacher, and honestly, I love the sheriff, so, nothing against him, but, the sheriff fighting a monster from Native American mythology, which can be a little bit, I don't know. I don't know if the film really handled that super well.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Like, we've seen, like, the Wendigo and, like, other things, like, shows and whatnot. Like, off the top of my head, I think I first became aware of the Wendigo when I was, like, doing research on, like, the Hulk and Wolverine back in high school, and like they fought this villain that was called the Wendigo, and I was like, oh, what is this? And I like looked it up at the time because this is like a little backstory for me, but at the time I was considering writing like fan fiction that basically like if the X-Men movies and the MCU were like the same universe, but obviously that can't really work. Yeah, that's when I learned what the Wendigo was, and it's really weird how like a couple of years ago there's like a script for something called X-Men Fear the Beast, and they tried to retrofit it so that like instead of the Hulk and Wolverine, it's like Beast and Wolverine, but Beast becomes more monstrous, and they do like fight the Wendigo from Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel has a classic. I mean, all comic books classically tend to be pretty insensitive about this kind of stuff. But I will note for like Marvel, the New Mutants movie. It's so funny that we're talking about this. So New Mutants was also a movie that came out. Very famously, there's quite a few notable like Native American characters in the X-Men lineup, including the leader of the New Mutants. So, in some of their stories, not all, I think they get a little bit more leeway for kind of pulling on this mythology and incorporating these like cultural aspects. This movie didn't really give me this vibe, and don't get me wrong, like I feel like overall it was like a pretty solid like horror movie, pretty solid monster flick, and it did a lot of that atmospheric creepy build up really well. I mean, the scene with where he's like feeding that thing, and when he brings the kid into the woods later. I mean, that stuff was super creepy, and I would say this movie did really well atmospherically up until they actually showed the thing, but again, there's like I just feel like we have to acknowledge that little like cultural thing. Like this is definitely I don't know. I don't feel like I can in good conscience say that this movie paid its respects to its Native American heritage. And then again, I mean, Nick Antosca, I don't know anything about him. Maybe he has like a background, or or maybe the cast was like heavily involved in like Native American lore or whatever. But it's definitely when you've got a cast full of white people who are the victims, and then classically like the local Native American believe in the Wendigo, and they warned you, white people. It's just a very classic setup that is still kind of harkens back to perhaps less racially sensitive times. I mean, this movie did come out in 2020, which, to be fair, isn't an excuse, but we've had even more, I think, visibility now for these sorts of issues, even just with the way 2020 is going.
I just looked up Nick and Tosca. Like, there's not a whole lot about him on this article.
There really isn't.
One of the things I noticed is that he co-produced 13 episodes of the Hannibal TV show. And that's like another thing where the show has like its own Wendigo of sorts. Like, it's not literally there within the show. It's more like imagery to represent like the cannibalism that's going on. And I remember at the time, like, I thought, oh, this looks so cool. But yeah, it's like this show, Hannibal, is pretty much made by like white people, and like Supernatural even had an episode with the Wendigo, and so it's like
back in the 2000s. Again, I'm not trying to make excuses for anyone, but at the very least, I like to think that as a society, we've come a little bit farther these days than we once were. You know, as you people may disagree, but no, he also actually was did some writing for Teen Wolf, which very similar thing. They pull from all sorts of cultures in that show without really much regard for like what it means that they're pulling from those cultures. Teen Wolf especially, I would say, is a pretty nasty offender in that regard. But that again, it's just personal opinion, and I do think this movie was still worth a watch, I think. I mean, it definitely, for its problems, pulling on some of those classic horror tropes is still kind of effective.
Like you mentioned Teen Wolf, and I do remember I fell behind at some point, so I never finished the show, but I do remember it pulling from cultures. Like, off the top of my head, there's like the Oni from Japanese.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they did a Kitsune, but I think, and they did it was an interesting like grab bag of mythological creatures, and sometimes that can really work. Like, sometimes it's really fun, and other times you're just sort of like, oh, okay, I guess so. Which is kind of how I felt for most of the show. I dropped off at like season 3, I think.
Yeah, I dropped off after the Dread Doctors storyline, whenever that was, but only because like it wasn't like easily accessible. Like, I used to watch it when it was streaming on MTV's website, and then I think it like switched to Prime or something like that. Cause
was that an MTV show?
On Netflix. Yeah, it was an MTV show.
God, man, you remember TV channels? That
Yeah.
was a thing once. I forgot, because like all the new shitty teen dramas are all like exclusives to streaming services, I think. Like, because Riverdale is the other one I think of when I think of like shitty teen dramas.
Oh yeah, I actually oh man, we're going on so many tangents, but I love these tangents. So I recently like tried watching Riverdale.
Oh no.
Well, actually, it was like March, April, or May or something. I watched like the first 2 seasons and the first few episodes of season 3. So what I noticed was that I think they've basically confirmed that like, yeah, Riverdale is partially inspired by Twin Peaks, which is a far superior show, and like season 1 has like the same structure as Twin Peaks season 1, so it had kind of an interesting vibe to it. But at a point I was watching just to see how much of a train wreck it would become, and I just like stopped watching because I got busy with like other things. But I think like right before the last episode that I watched, I also watched this really old Archie movie from like 1990. I think it's called Archie Comes Home. Let me look it up. It was like super cheesy and like really bad. Oh, Archie to Riverdale and back again. Yeah, so I was like tweeting about that, and probably nobody knew what I was talking about, but it was just so cringe and dated, and Yeah. With Teen Wolf, though, I do think that the show was better than the movie from the 80s. I like that they did it.
Yeah, well, and the first 2 seasons were like fun and solid. Like I would definitely, if you liked the Teen Wolf movies from the 80s, like I'm okay with the first couple seasons of Teen Wolf, to be totally honest.
Right. Yeah, like I do like some of the music from the Teen Wolf movie, but other than that, there's like not a whole lot to it, in my opinion. And so I thought it was smart that the show, instead of trying to redo the comedy aspect, made it like a bit more dramatic and like horror, but obviously it has like the same trappings of MTV shows that make you cringe with like the weird dubstep music that'll be like out of place every now and then.
I loved that weird dubstep music. Yeah, I have some weird hang-ups with Teen Wolf, I will admit that. So I'm probably gentler to it than I would normally be to a show of that quality.
Right. Yeah, like there are some things I enjoyed about it, but you do raise good points.
It did give us Superman.
Oh, yes.
Tyler Hoechlin? Yeah. And it gave us Dylan O'Brien, who I guess is like famous enough for me to say his name and that to mean something now. So, and Tyler Hoechlin came from our school. He was a UCI alum.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
How did I not know this?
Yeah, I forget. I knew that because I was in the film program, but like that's so funny to me. Anyways, I mean, he's Superman, so that's like, I don't care if you're Superman on a TV show, if you're Superman in a movie. Being able to say you got cast as Superman, that's a straight accomplishment.
Yeah, okay, so like recently in a DC group, there was this post where someone was like, which one do you prefer? And it's like Henry Cavill's Superman and Tyler, is it Heck-lin or Hoechlin? How's it pronounced?
I don't actually know. You'd think I would, but I do not.
Tyler's Superman. And in this thread, I think I was in the minority of preferring Tyler, because my whole thing is like, okay, so in Man of Steel, I related to Cavill's Superman feeling lonely and isolated, because it was like end of high school or whatever, and felt like super lonely. I thought it was fine, but then like after the mess that Batman versus Superman was, Tyler was such a breath of fresh air to see in the Supergirl show. Like he was bright and like optimistic, and like
he was like actually had Superman's personality. Like I get why people like Cavill, because he's a good actor, I'll give him that, and he has the Superman build, but Tyler has the Superman like, oh, I'm just a nice guy vibe, which I missed.
Yeah, like it's not Henry's fault obviously, but like,
no, it's the writing's fault for sure. I think with the right script, Henry would be an amazing Superman, but his movies do nothing for me. Didn't like Man of Steel, didn't like Batman vs. Superman, so it's a real shame.
Yeah, and like with Tyler, it's weird because like he's pretty much in a secondary or like minor role on Supergirl, because it's Supergirl's show, of course, but
yeah,
like whenever he appears on screen, I cannot help but like be super happy at the way he's playing the character, because it's like, yes, this is how Superman should be played.
Yeah, no, there's very few. There's a lot of things I have problems with on that show for sure, but that's definitely not one of them.
Right. Yeah, I also have like some problems with the show, but
it's a good thing this is not a Supergirl podcast.
Right. Oh boy.
Man.
All right, so yeah, this movie.
Yeah, back to the topic at hand.
Yeah. And we're back. So yeah, Jesse Plemons plays the sheriff, who is like Julia's brother.
Yeah, easily the highlight of the movie, by the way.
Yeah, like it's weird because I'm like so used to hating him on Breaking Bad because of like the character he plays, but he does like a really solid job, and like I believed him and his expressions and how scared he seemed when they found like body parts in the woods and in the mine. So I thought he did a top-notch job here.
Yeah, no, and I think like his personality, like he was definitely playing, the trope here, sheriff doesn't believe in the supernatural, yada yada yada. But, kind of like we talked about a little bit with the Native American mythology thing, this entire movie is really kind of a callback movie in a lot of ways. So I think it made sense that he was playing to a trope, and I thought he did a really good job. I mean, he was definitely one of my favorite people to have on screen. Like, to be totally honest, I wasn't a super big fan of, what was the female lead's name again?
Kerry Russell.
Yeah, she did a good job for what she was meant to do, but I do think, while this film benefited from being like a classic horror movie. It also, there's some downsides to that, and sometimes that's just, Carrie's character was super, I guess, stereotypical in some ways too, and just not quite as fun, which she wasn't supposed to be. But that dynamic was their dynamic was really good though. So they both, I think, should get credit for the way they worked together on screen. But I definitely enjoyed him the most out of all the performances. Though we should talk about this kid. How old was he when they filmed this?
Let's see. So he was played by Jeremy T. Thomas. I'm trying to see if there's anything that says his age. See full bio. And there's nothing, so it's not a full bio.
Yeah, no, he seemed anyways, because I feel like, a movie that features a child actor this heavily, we should talk about the child actor a little bit. I think he did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, he was very believable, and I also really liked when Julia was looking at the drawings that he did, and she was like, "What is this?" And he tried to casually say, "It's for Inktober," and it's
yeah, that was a little bit of a weird reference, to be totally honest, for a scary movie. Kind of pulled me out of it a little bit, but I guess it was funny.
Right, because you've done Inktober before, right?
I have. I never finish. I always get partway through, but I get busy and also bite off more than I can chew, basically all the time.
Right, but I like how these drawings look, and also that little miniature version of the Wendigo head, where it looks like a deer skull with antlers. I thought there was some good arts and crafts stuff going on in this movie.
Yeah.
Especially with the Wendigo shaped cookie that he makes at some point in the movie.
I do think, as far as the drawings and artistic representations of the Wendigo go, credit really needs to be given to the real masterminds behind that, which is, of course, the underpaid interns and production assistants on staff. They actually hire, in film, people specifically to do these child drawings.
Right.
It can be quite a challenge for some of the artists because they have to really get into the head of a child and also move the plot along. So it's real good job, I think, on all their parts, and especially whoever had to do the cookie.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to make it believable that he could make it, but also obvious to the audience what was going on.
Right. Yeah, with the drawing, it looks good, and I can imagine that someone his age might be able to do that. So I thought the art department or whoever, or the underpaid interns or whatever, did a good job with that. So yeah, Lucas is acting really weird, and he tells a friend about the Wendigo. He doesn't really know what it is, but he sees that there's something in the woods, and takes a friend to it. And when it shows up, we don't get a full image of it at this point, but the friend is terrified and runs away, but Lucas just stands there as if there's an understanding between him and the creature.
Yeah, I feel like you and I had very different interpretations of that scene, if only because I really was getting the vibe that Lucas was really trying to feed this thing at certain points throughout the movie, regardless of when his connection with the creature really came into play. It did feel to me like Lucas was at least somewhat knew what he was doing when he was leading his friend out there, though good on him for running away.
Yeah. I did wonder whether he's trying to feed his friend to the Wendigo, but I guess they kind of leave it ambiguous so that you can kind of still root for Lucas.
Yeah, even though he's definitely playing the creepy child card.
Yeah. So eventually, Julia is trying to figure out what's going on with him, and eventually they encounter the Wendigo together, and we get a full of it late in the film. And what did you think of how it was depicted?
So, full disclosure, currently I work with a team of character artists, a lot of whom previously worked in the film industry on all sorts of things. Actually, one of my coworkers used to work on The Flash. A couple of them used to work on Avatar. I have one who is just came over from The Mandalorian. And I gotta say, I always am cautious with critiquing scenes like this because, credit where credit is due. I think the artist did an amazing job. But as far as like scary movies go, I always prefer when they don't show us the monster. Even if the monster looks super cool, it just takes so much away from the experience, in my opinion. I don't know if you agree.
I think it's definitely a case-by-case basis. Like, with my brother, I kind of chuckle whenever he's like, I think it was Cloverfield, and like when he saw what the monster looks like, he's like, what? That's it? And it's like, I mean, why are people so super invested in like what it looks like? Isn't it like all about the journey?
I mean, but so when you think about like story structure, right? You're building up to this like moment, and if you've been building in your head that entire time, because here's part of the problem. Part of the problem is they show it, at like not in the beginning. I mean, generally speaking, story structure wise, right, with horror movies and all these movies, we build up to the big reveal. And the problem is, if you wait until the build-up to reveal the monster, the audience already built up ideas about what it should look like and how it should make them feel in their heads. If the art
Sure.
doesn't hit it exactly, that's why everyone gets upset. I actually think a lot of these movies could get away with showing the monster more if they showed the monster earlier. I think it does a really good job with the clown imagery, just because we know it going in, so the clown remains creepy no matter how much you see of the clown. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see that. Like, another example that comes to mind is Evil Dead 2, and like the monster doesn't fully appear until the very end, so my brother was like upset about that, how it looked there too. But like, how do you think it works in the case of Jaws? Because like we all know what a shark looks like, but was it like effective there?
Yeah, because not being able to see something is such like an inherent human fear. I do think the thing about Jaws too is they had like such technical limitations on what they were able to show us with that shark. So even when we do get better glimpses of the shark, it is nothing like what they would have done today. Like, it's not a full body splash page of the shark in like cinematic lighting. It's like you see. Yeah, I think Jaws uses it to great effect. I don't think it was intentional. I think it was due to technical limitations, and I think even normal creatures are scarier if you don't know where they are.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I can't help but think of like Marty McFly's line of like, the shark still looks fake with like that Jaws 19 thing in Back to the Future 2.
Oh man. Jaws holds up pretty well though, all things considered, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like one of my all-time favorites, but I do acknowledge that it was like a groundbreaking when it came out.
It's not one of your all-time favorites. That's funny.
Oh, how so?
Oh, I love that movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have friends who like love it like a lot. I can't remember if they're friends or just people I've like heard or listened to or watched on YouTube or whatever.
It's a very, very well-regarded movie. But...
yeah, it is. But yeah, like, I don't know, like I don't have like that same attachment or like amazement for it that like other people have.
I don't think it's amazement. I think it's just there's so few solid movies, and making a movie is very hard. It's rare that a movie feels like it delivers on all its promises, if that makes sense. And I think Jaws is a movie that delivers on everything it said it was going to deliver over the course of the film.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Plus, a lot of us saw it young and like got scared mindless.
Okay, I watched it in like high school, I think.
Oh yeah, I watched it when I was like 5.
Okay. Yeah, I also watched the sequels, but you could say that like the franchise jumped the shark then with the sequels.
I didn't even know they were sequels because my parents didn't tell me.
Oh wow. Okay, so there's Jaws 2, which still has like the family and whatever, and there's Jaws 3D, which follows like the two sons. They're like grown up and they work at SeaWorld in Florida, I think. And
that's terrible.
Yeah, the movie.
I hate everything you've just described. I will say this: my parents used to do this thing where they wouldn't they wouldn't not only not show us movies that they didn't like, they just sort of didn't acknowledge that those movies existed for the most part. So, like, I didn't know that X-Files had more than 3 seasons. I didn't ever see the first season of Next Generation or the first season of Babylon 5. And, like, we only ever got to see Jurassic Park 1 and 3 and Matrix 1. And I think actually they did let us watch Matrix 2, but we are disappointed by it. We only got to see Alien and Aliens. Like, there was a lot of that growing up, so I'm not shocked I didn't know about the Jaws sequels, and I am once more grateful for what my parents did for me.
Well, there's like a lot to unpack there. Okay, so I think Babylon 5 season 1 is good, but it's also better once
Everyone always brings it up.
It's better once you've like seen the rest of the show and know what's coming, so you can pick up on like what it's like feeding you.
So here's what I've figured out, and I still haven't seen season 1 of Babylon 5. But what I've figured out from the people I've talked to have been like, how can you not see it? That show is one of the best shows ever. You have to watch the complete story. Something you get if you only have watched season 2 is you get super attached to Sheridan. Like, so if you watch season 1, if you watch season 1 and you're connected to that first commander, you don't even know his name.
Sinclair.
Yeah, if you watch season 1 of Sinclair, I've noticed that, like, a lot of people react differently to kind of the story. And I was explaining it to someone. I'm like, they're like, how could you even do that? Like, the story. And I'm like, no, but the story is great. Because if you start on season 2, you start with Sheridan. His first day is your first day. Everything's fucking weird. She's in a cocoon. Why is she in a cocoon? You don't know. Sheridan doesn't know. And that is actually like a super interesting like route into the series. Like, I think it's one of the reasons I've never felt compelled to go back and watch the first season, because starting from the second season, it still feels like a complete show.
Okay, so like when I watched the show for the first time, I think 6 years ago, I started with Sinclair, you know, with the like pilot movie and the first season, and I enjoyed the character, and I understood why they had to like switch to Sheridan, because like, you know, as we learned like much later, the actor who played Sinclair was like, he had like an illness, so they had to like change it up. And yeah, season 2 feels like a soft reboot of the show by like bringing in Sheridan,
and they still tie Sinclair in later. Like, I mean, for people who loved him, so I do appreciate that about it. But yeah, no, the experience of going along with Sheridan as he is at the same time discovering what the frick is going on, it's really good.
Yeah, so I got attached to Sinclair and then attached to Sheridan, and I don't know, like, to me, I think it's, like, amazing how, like, it's a rare show where, like, you start with one main character and then all of a sudden there's a different main character you're following, and I don't know any other shows that have, like, accomplished that in that same way. It's weird.
Yeah, no, the writers were good, and they were able to salvage something that a lot of other shows would have fallen apart under, so I am very glad for that.
Yeah. But, yeah, getting back to Jaws 3D, so it ends with, like, this really weird thing where, like, the shark gets blown up and then the jaws, like, fly at the screen in 3D, and it's so stupid. And then you have the fourth movie, Jaws: The Revenge, where, like, do you care if I, like, spoil what happens?
Oh, no, not at all. I am literally never going to watch it.
Okay, so I guess the brothers, like, are slightly older, but they have, like, different jobs now, and, like, the younger brother like gets killed by a shark, which is like
what are the chances of that, like, statistically speaking?
Right. And so like there's this weird thing where like I guess I don't remember if this is explained in the movie or just in like some novelization I've heard about, but apparently there's like a voodoo element that makes this shark follow the family like down a coastline to wherever they're like traveling to in the movie. I can't remember where, and it's
move to a f***ing landlocked state. It's not that hard.
It's like the shark is like seeking revenge or whatever for, I guess, what happened to like other sharks. It has a grudge against the Brody family. It's like super stupid. But anyway, getting back to Antlers, I did kind of like how the Wendigo looked. Although I did kind of get mixed feelings when it was growing, and I get that it has to do with like the mythology of how like if it eats more people, its stomach will grow, and I guess the rest of it grows. I think that's how it happens.
Yeah, they didn't explain that super well in the movie. I was a little confused on that point too.
Yeah, like some of the mythology pertaining to the Wendigo, it's like if they throw a bit of information about it in the movie, it's very like blink and you'll miss it. Like,
Mhm.
I know there's like a show don't tell thing, but there are instances where you should pause for a moment to explain like what can happen and like what's going on, you know?
Yeah, I had a little bit of that. Again, I've said it before. I'll say it again. That old school movie feel where we're just. And I guess I was gonna say old school movie, but maybe more old school comics where like they'd pull stuff and they wouldn't really explain it. They'd just be like, "Here's the monster," and you just kind of accepted that.
Right. It wasn't like those other old school comics where you'd have like a lot of narration in the panel to
Yeah,
like
no, I
explain.
definitely think for different types of old school stuff. I'm thinking of So I think what you're thinking of is like the 80s. I'm thinking back to like Golden Age.
Well, I've seen that in the 60s and 70s as well, but anyway, like comics are different like throughout time periods, yeah.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm thinking of like pulps and that sort of thing. But regardless, it was all right. I mean, I get what they were going for, anyways, and it didn't really detract from my enjoyment of the movie. Mostly because I was already kind of in the back of my head thinking about like the implications of using these like mythological characters without really like necessarily having done the research. And honestly, with this guy's like writing background, no offense, but Teen Wolf does not inspire confidence in me that it's like the most how do we say but it would be the most sensitive like depiction, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And so like there's this like chase sequence and like obviously Julia's trying to like protect Lucas, but Lucas wants to like get closer to the creature and she's like trying to like make him understand, you know, like, yo, this is a bad thing that we're facing. So like Julia remembers like what she's been told about the Wendigo and like her research and stuff and how like I guess like I don't know how accurate this is, but I guess like some stories say that the Wendigo can be defeated with fire. How do you feel about how that whole resolution played out?
I mean, I guess it's fine. Vampires get defeated with fire too, so I guess it's classic in that particular sense. It did seem a little bit dangerous to have Lucas doing it, though. I don't know about that.
Yeah, because like I guess he's able to get closer to the Wendigo because
Yeah, and it kind of resolved his whole character thing where he was like trying to make friends with it or whatever, but it definitely felt like a weird decision on their part. Like I didn't really see that I didn't really see her letting him do that, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't seem right for her character.
right, like you wouldn't like in real life you wouldn't expect like a teacher like her to send the kid to do the thing.
Exactly.
And like she's like tried knocking sense into him like figuratively by like saying that the Wendigo has like eaten people and that like you know killing people is wrong and it's like she's like how'd you feel if the Wendigo ate me or your family and like stuff like that and it's like you get a hint that maybe he like realizes the weight of all this but even as he's walking to the Wendigo with like the torch you wonder like what his intentions are whether he's gonna legitimately try to kill it but like he turns around and there's a moment where like you're not sure but then he looks at the Wendigo and like kills it with fire and of course we get that like horrible like shrieking sound from the Wendigo as it's burning.
Yeah, that was not a huge fan of the audio on that one, to be totally honest. It's exactly the kind of thing that haunts your nightmares.
Yeah, it really hurt my ears, not gonna lie. Like I had to like make sure that my hearing was good like after that screening. But yeah, so like the Wendigo is defeated and like they have a little talk with Lucas and like he looks at the drawings that he made and like they're by the fireplace and he decides to throw the drawings into the fire and also like the little arts and crafts thing. So, you know, symbolism, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, kind of bringing it around full circle. I get what they were going for.
Yeah. And like the camera like zooms in on the fireplace in an eerie fashion when like the creepy music is playing. And you get like this weird like flame that is like in the shape of a Wendigo. It's like one of those effects that you would see like at the beginning of like an end credit thing where like it becomes animated and then like it roll credits. It's like that was kind of cheesy.
Felt a
don't know.
little bit like sequel bait, to be honest, but
I hope it's not sequel bait. Like maybe it's just like one last image of the Wendigo at the end of the movie, but I don't know.
No, well, you know how it is these days. Everything gets a sequel.
Right, and the things that deserve sequels don't get any.
Basically.
Where's my Zathura 2? Did you ever watch Zathura?
I don't think so. What is that?
It's like Jumanji. Like the book was even by
Oh,
the same
wait, I
author.
totally do remember that. Wasn't it like in space?
Yes.
Yeah, I totally watched that. We just thought it was like a Jumanji thing.
Yeah, like I think in the book, I've never read the book, but from what I've read online, the Zathura book was more connected to Jumanji. Like I think the Jumanji game even appears in the story, but the Zathura movie doesn't mention Jumanji at all. But I still love the movie. Like I rewatched it recently, and it still holds up in my opinion.
Well, it's good to know.
Yeah. It's always good to know there are movies that you loved as a kid that still hold up when you watch them later on.
I don't remember loving that one, but I did like it.
Okay. Right. So I guess with that, we can go into final thoughts and then score out of 10. So what are your final thoughts and score out of 10 for this movie?
With the sort of renaissance that horror movies have been having with things like Get Out and things like Midsummer, this movie, I think, struggles a little bit to kind of find its place among those more modern movies. It's definitely not the weakest movie I've seen come out. I also watched The Invisible Man a long time ago, a couple others, and it's spooky. It's got decent atmosphere, some decent jump scares, but I do think the writing falls a little bit flat with the way the movie tried to wrap itself up at the very end. I get what they were going for. We kind of talked about it with the tying in the mythology and having the kid be the one to do it, but it just didn't quite work. But I think up until that, I solidly enjoyed it. Probably a good 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I feel that. Like about the mythology, like I feel like even if they did do their research, like I feel like they didn't go all in with it. Like I feel like they kept it like streamlined so that, like, I don't know, I just feel like they held back on all that. And of course there's like all the other problems we talked about. So for me, so I feel like Antlers had some nice creepy moments. Some of the pacing was good, some of the music was like really good, like top-notch creepiness, and the imagery as well, but I feel like it could have been better. So I feel like I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 10.
Alright, that's pretty close to what I did, so yeah, I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah. Also, like you mentioned The Invisible Man. I still haven't seen it, but I guess that kind of true to form, not seeing The Invisible Man.
It's an interesting movie. I'm not sure what you'll think of it, but I would look forward to hearing your thoughts.
All right, yeah, I do want to check it out at some point. But anywho, do you have like anything you'd like to plug for our listeners?
Yeah. Bit of a off-topic thing, but currently we're working on an ongoing series. Me and my friend Kyle share. Something Ends, Something Begins, a retrospective of Witcher Saga. We're currently on hiatus while I work my way through the third game, so that we can finish up our retrospective. But it is just so many articles, over 20, I think now, that cover everything from the short stories to the novels to the games, and we will probably also be covering some of the DLC and extra smaller content that's coming out and has come out regarding The Witcher, and we even did a little one-off about the show. So if you like The Witcher, that is over at thedailyfandom.org.
Yeah, and I'll link that in the show notes so people can click on it when they look at the episode info.
Beautiful.
Yeah, like that's such dedication that you two have been like going through all the Witcher stuff.
Yeah, I need to call him and apologize for it being like I think it's gonna be like another 6 months before we're able to put up the final articles because it's taking me so long to get through this third game. It is yeah, dedication is a word for it.
Right. Yeah, and I know the show has been around for almost a year, but I still need to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have this friend who was like like her pet peeve is when people think it's based on the video games.
Yeah, I mean, to be totally honest, I don't super enjoy The Witcher as a franchise. Like, I enjoy it enough, obviously, to write an excessive amount of articles about it, but
Sure.
it's definitely a thing I do partially because, I have such a good friend who is so passionate about it and I enjoy talking about it with him, but I'm hypercritical of them. Read the way the two of us go back and forth. Yes, the show is based on the books. I don't think the books are very good. I think the show has actually made some improvements over what the books did. I will say this, though, for anyone who is curious, because this is already covered in my The Witcher retrospective. I don't enjoy the books, but I think the ending to the books, the last book, the seventh book in the series, is just phenomenal. That is easily the best ending I've ever read in a book ever, but it's highly dependent on sort of the plotting that came before it in the other novels, and it's something that the game completely ignores, which drives me up the wall. I don't even like the series that much, and I'm playing this third game banging my head against the wall being like, that's not how it is in the books. Like, I'm one of those people now. It's the worst.
Yeah, and it's usually 7 books with these fantasy novel series, right?
Well, I don't think his I wouldn't treat him the same way as that, because the difference of him is the two first books are actually a collection of short stories, and the books really aren't.
Oh,
Yeah, and
right.
the books, honestly, the books they literally take place one right after the other. They read like a continuous book. You could probably burn through all of them in like a day, maybe a few days, but you could, and they feel like they belong together. It's not epic, and like it's not. I wouldn't call it an epic fantasy. It's a little bit more of like it's not low fantasy either. I guess a pulp fantasy. A pulp fantasy.
A bit of an easier read from what you're saying, I think.
It is an easier read for sure. It's also you're definitely not going to get Lord of the Rings off of this, and I think some people go in kind of expecting this to be Lord of the Rings, and it's really not. And it's best enjoyed for what it is, which is a very modern fantasy story for the time it was written in.
Yeah, I mean, Lord of the Rings, like, I love that, but I go into these things expecting them to be whatever it is they are presenting. So I am very curious about The Witcher. Like, I do intend to get to the show at some point.
Yeah, I definitely, if you like the show at all, the books will be worth your time. My friend super disagrees. He hates the show, but as someone who has watched and read basically everything Witcher at this point, definitely, if you like the show, check out the books.
Okay, yeah, I have like so much stuff on my watch list and reading list, so we'll see what happens.
Oh, same. I'm still halfway through the King Killer Chronicles. Someday I'll finish that.
Yeah. But speaking of reading, as for my plugs, you can find my own fantasy horror comedy novel, Lemons Will Make Rain, on Amazon. More info on that at stevenschinder.com. And you can also follow me at Steven Schinder on Instagram and Twitter, Steven Schinder Storytelling on Facebook. And I've also been writing/editing for Culture Slate, an entertainment news site. They are at Culture Slate pretty much everywhere. And if you want to email the podcast, you can email delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. No emails this time, but hey, maybe that will happen a different time. All right. And thanks again for being on this episode, Claudia.
Of course. It was good to talk to you again.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Without further delay, have a good day.
Ow, 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 ow. Oh, such a headache. What's going on in there? The theme park is complete. Looks like Galaxy's Edge, but terraformed with fangs and claws and spikes and antlers. Truly horrific. As we ride these rides, we will complete the corruption of Stephen.